This is Phantom Electric Ghost doing live on the air with Marcy Axelrod, your visionary leader and award-winning author and TV contributor. And welcome to the Phantom Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing tonight?
Thank you so much, Phantom. I am doing terrific. Super happy to be here with you on, the second week after book launch.
That's awesome. And we're going to talk about that, the truth about showing up. And we also have your link and let people know that our URLs are fully clickable, so you don't have to remember that. But choosetoshow.up.com will be fully clickable. And right now we're on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitch live. Later, we'll be on all the podcast platforms that you can listen to or watch a podcast. And then one of the things I like to mention is we are a featured podcast on Newsly. And if you check that out, you can use that coupon code GHOST, and that's an audio-only platform. You can check that out. We'll be on there later tonight. If you use that coupon code, you'll have Newsly for a month on us. So that's you can check that out. But one of the first things we always ask any guest is what motivates you and why do you do what you do?
I love that question, Phantom. Thank you so much. And it's actually in the first couple pages of my book because it was very clear to me what the experiences were that led me to do the work that I do, which is basically write, speak, and teach about what showing up truly is. So the answer is that there were 3 lessons that I got when I was young. My mother is a pediatrician and her beeper would go off. And when her beeper went off any time of day, 2 a.m., snowstorm, didn't matter. My job was hop out of bed, clear the driveway so that she could go race to the emergency room. And it happened quite a few times. So there I am, 13 years old. It's 2 a.m. and she comes in. I've got to go in. So I hop out of bed, shovel the driveway like my life depended on it. And I had in my mind, Phantom, I had in my mind the image of the parents' faces who were waiting for my mother to show up in the emergency room. And it turns out that night she resuscitated a dying baby. So that is reason number 1 that I do what I do. It's a message, you matter. And it's not just a message for me. It's a message for all of us. The second thing that happened is I started to stutter when I was 6 years old. And my throat just locked. It was a combination of, the environment being pressured and the genetic predisposition, right? We always need those 2 things coming together. And my throat was just locked. So I couldn't speak. And I was watching all these people around me, starting at age 6, really not being kind or showing up as a bully or showing up as a scaredy cat. And I said to myself, I can't show up as I choose. But here are all these people, perhaps who can, but they're not choosing how they're showing up. That was the second thing. There was a third thing. So now I'm about 13 or 14 years old. And my parents sent me over this summer to live at a rehabilitation hospital where elders were recovering from strokes because they had a period, they had a special program to help people like me learn to speak. I was still stuttering, which I still do, although you're not hearing it right now. And I looked around and I saw these elders in their 60s and 70s and 80s, and they were learning to walk and to feed themselves, basic things. And they were supported by caregivers who were professionals, and they had these plans. And I said to myself, even people with a lifetime of practicing showing up in a place with experts to help them and a strategic plan about how to do it, even with everything that they need, they're still struggling to show up as they choose. And I said to myself, where's the roadmap? Why is this so hard? We need a blueprint that explains what does it mean to truly show up? How were we designed to do it? So those 3 things came together when I was young. And, with everything I've studied and everything I've done, everything has led me to this path. 20 years of research into what it means to truly show up. The book is now, came out 2 weeks ago. It's been number 1 for the solid 2 weeks. So that's how I became who I am. And just like all of us, Phantom, I mean, it's no clue that the struggles that we have define our path. I'm a professional speaker and I spent my life stuttering. So what does that tell you?
Well, I think a lot of times you have to take the thing that's like the hardest thing in your life and challenge it. And then you can kind of, you basically, you can actualize. So a lot of times, like I deal with artists, and artists,
Mhm.
have their stage presence, and then they have their actual like real self. And a lot of times,
Yep.
they're diametrically opposed. Like a lot of the artists I deal with, they're super shy,
Mhm.
but when they can get on stage, it's almost like they're another person. So it's very common in the arts that you get these people that like, well, how can this guy even show up on stage? But suddenly when they show up on stage, they're like totally, they're like Freddie Mercury or Prince or something. Like, how can
Mhm.
they do that? Because when you talk to them, like in the real world, they can barely communicate. I'm like, wow, how does that happen? And it is
Mm.
something that, artists sometimes will focus on it to be on that stage for 2 hours. And other times in life, you want to actually make that more than 2 hours. You want to make that be more of your life.
Right, Phantom, I am so glad that you brought that up. With me as well, and with stutterers and people in general who are shy or have stress issues, when it comes to, presenting ourselves, be it speech or eye contact or other things. So when we act on a stage, when stutterers pretend to be someone else and we become theatrical, the words flow. And I don't doubt for a moment that living that truth when I was young created how I show up today. I am theatrical. I do present. I am on stages. So what you said is completely applicable to
Yeah.
me. And I'll tell you, my stage right now, I mean, it's not necessarily a performance like people would expect. I mean, someone from the United Nations headquarters just reached out to me last week to speak to me about potentially doing a speech for them in November for a very special audience. So I'll tell you, these things can lead you to really wonderful, impactful places in life.
Yeah, a lot of times it's like you just have to, we have limiting beliefs that at some point, like I had a speech impediment. I was very shy. I was
Mm,
not the type of person who would even be here. But I had something happen, and I was a cancer survivor. I had cancer when I was 27. I'm 56. And it changed my perspective because I said, well, if I can survive that, why am I so scared of going on stage? Why am I
wow.
so scared of being an announcer or doing the things I do now? But the 27, 26-year-old version of me, I would not be on a mic.
Mhm,
I would not be presenting. I wouldn't have done 1,000 interviews.
mhm,
It's just sometimes something happens where you work through it or you have
mhm.
epiphany. It doesn't have to be cancer to have that epiphany, but like at some point you figure it out, and
Mhm.
everybody's on their own timeline when they figure it out.
Yes,
I think a
yes.
lot of us, you want to help people to have it happen earlier than
Mhm.
later.
Can we raise a glass together and thank the challenges that have helped to create who we are today? And may we be helping others in some small way.
Yeah, I think that's the whole point, is to be a teacher. I mean, a lot of times
Mhm,
if you're a music producer, you're like a music teacher, right? So you're working with people and you're trying to bring out like
mhm,
who that person is. So a lot of times what I
mhm,
want to do and what I see what therapists do is they want to get to the real person and pull them
mhm.
out and get
Right.
them to not be scared of who they are. And the same thing
Mhm.
with an artist is like, I want you to show me what the songs that you're most scared of showing anybody, because that's probably the actual self rather than trying to be somebody else. They're
Mhm.
trying to get into the comparison trap of, oh, try to sound like what's hip. It's like, no, I want you to sound like you,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
Because you are what's hip. Like you're the next thing. But if you don't believe that, you're going to
Yes.
try to clone somebody else. Well, that's already there, right?
Right.
So that's not really your magic. Is your individual self. Nobody has that,
Yes.
and that's what you have to build and respect and cherish. And a lot of people are like, oh, that's going to make me arrogant. That doesn't make you arrogant. That makes you like you.
Right.
Like
Right.
you don't have to be arrogant to believe in yourself.
This is so perfect. So, if it's because this is part of showing up. So, it turns out we don't show up in one role of self. We show up in three roles. So, I'm going to tell you what the three are, and then I'm going to define each. One of them is self. So, it's a direct link here. So, right now, you could say we're individualized selves, right? You have Marcy Axelrod, an author and speaker, and we have Phantom Electric, right? A musician. However, what's going on right now? What's going on right now is that how you show up and how I show up is in some kind of dynamic dance. So we're actually created in response to the situation. So we have a situational role. But then what's going on out there? We have a societal role, because right now we're live, potentially, in the minds and ears and eyes, potentially 8+ billion people. So we're in 3 roles at once. We're individualized selves. We're members of a situation that is co-creating us and what we do and what we say right now, while also impacting the world. I call it self-situation society. That's part of showing up. And each one has a way to do it well, right? You want to be grounded in yourself, so you're not afraid. So you can be vulnerable. You can be real. That's what makes you compelling and alive. You want to be ready for your situations. Yeah, am I hitting home here? You want to be ready for your situations. And what that means is that you recognize that there's an aliveness. You recognize also that you're bringing a set of knowledge from the past, all of your experiences that create who you are, but you're also ready for the improvisational right here, right now aspects, right? Of like what would you...
I love that. It's like jazz, like a jazz thing, I believe in flow state, that's why we do this live, because I believe that when you're in that flow state, you're in the present moment, and you can't pull from the inner and the outer. So it's like the muse or your dreams or your subconscious is like, as an artist, you can channel all that, and you trust that, and you can be in that moment and create something new.
I couldn't agree more. So I was on a stage with Dizzy Gillespie. I'm a flautist, and I somehow, through a fluke, made the Cornell Jazz Ensemble, and Dizzy came on stage, and I was the only woman in the group, and he pointed to me, and it was my time to show up and improv in front of 3,000 people in Bailey Hall. And thank God I was in a flow state, because everybody seemed to like it. But you talk about jazz. John Cow wrote a book called Jamming. You might have read it. Changed my life. And improv is what we do every moment of every day. This is the situational role in which we show up. Showing up is improv. So the best that you can do is to bring your grounded self that understands who you are and why, so that you can show up in a thoughtful, calm, present way, so that the situation presences for you and you presence to it in kind of your fullness, with kindness, with curiosity, because that's when your societal role shows up, because we're impacting each other at every moment, whether or not we're on a podcast that's going out to potentially 8+ billion people this instant. Even when we're just in our rooms by ourselves, maybe picking up a book, everything that we're doing has an impact. With the book, we cast an economic vote, and we're pulling through a 6-continent supply chain. If we're clicking through things, we're also sending messages around the world about what to show others and what to show. We're always impacting the world. And I want every person to take this to heart. You matter. What you do is impacting everybody right now. And how you show up in this instant is impacting the world.
Yeah, I'm a strong believer in that, because I have a Buddhist, but we have this idea of the law of attraction, and then I'm a sound designer, musician, and what I find is, everybody has a frequency, right? And so when you walk into a room, you can kind of feel that bad vibe or a good vibe, right? And so you can pick up people's frequencies, whether or not it's like, oh, that's foo-foo, but it's like a lot of times, like as a musician, I believe it, because like if I play a certain type of sound, I can trigger melancholy. I could trigger like people to be like in a punk kind of attitude in a mosh pit. People could be swaying side to side, depending on the frequencies and the rhythms I use. Yes. And over time, as doing it for 30 years, you can actually trigger the audience to behave a certain way, and it's back and forth. Yes. And you can actually read the room and you
That's
you can feel it, and it goes both
mhm,
ways. And so once you realize
mhm.
that that's not just music, you can do that as a speaker. You can do that just talking to somebody, because the frequency and the loudness of your voice, those are waves, just like the waves that you play on a clarinet or any instrument. So
Yes.
once you realize that, then you get more of an expansive view of the world, and you realize you do have an impact of the way you're behaving. Is law of attraction. You bring a negativity to you or positivity or somewhere in the middle.
It sounds like you've read my book. I love what you're saying. So I talk about similar things. If it's all right with you, can I add some of the neuroscience that explains how that works?
Yeah, yeah. Because I'm just going from a like a intuitive kind of, musician point of view, but you
Mhm.
can back it up with the science on it.
You and I are really vibing here. I am loving this. So first, what you were discussing about reading the room, right? And creating the energy in the room by responsiveness, that is being in your situational role and truly showing up to it. So, what's actually going on when we perceive of something new, we're actually using our right brain hemisphere's mode of attention. We have two attention systems. One let us focus on something that's really, really small and grab it and get it. And in this left brain mode, we're all about manipulating things. But those things are static. They're kind of dead. There's no flow. When we're doing what you were discussing about reading the room and kind of flowing with it, and someone hearing that there's a different type of music and kind of changing how we dance from a slow sway into the like jumping up and down mosh pit thing, they're in their far more intuitive relational connected flow of the right hemisphere, and that's the one where we feel what someone else feels, and that's the one where I can look at the intensity of your eyes and notice you are with me, and the little curl of your grin of the smile and be like, yup, he's with what I have to say. So only when we're using our right attention system are we truly human to human, feeling each other, caring for each other. That is leadership. That is being a great parent. That is being the friend who we want to be. And it's very much present when we sway to music, because otherwise, guess what? It would be abstracted. The music would come across as, oh, that was 5 C's. Oh, and then there were 2 C sharps. It would be a jumble of data, and it would
Yeah.
mean nothing. And
Yeah.
that's what the left hemisphere does. Yes. So that's the difference there. And we anyone who's interested, contact me, because this is really important stuff, because our society today has so much mental illness and anger and violence, and what's going on the college
Yeah.
campuses with the tents and all of that because of what's going on in Israel and Palestine. That is left-brained stuff. That is when we're not human to human. That is when we are human to object, and we're more using our left grab it, get it, manipulate it mode. And that is not a good way to show up. That's not when we're going to leave the legacy that we want to leave. And that's not when we're going to lay in bed at night feeling healthy and satisfied.
Yeah. I mean, I'm coming from, I don't know. I went to school with a Socratic method. I went to Bowdoin College. And so a lot of the thinking we had back then, and and these kids should be in that kind of frame, but they seem to have lost it. Is the idea is like you learn like to understand things so that you can actually not just remember something so you can pass an SAT, but actually have critical thinking so that you can
Mhm.
discern and apply knowledge in the correct context, right? So that you can understand,
Mhm.
sociology, like how do I deal with the microcosm and the macrocosm, and not just think
Mhm.
it's a theory from from any of the great sociological, canons, but actually figure out how to actually make that theory work with humanity, right? To understand how to take knowledge and apply it instead of just being in a camp that's left wing or right wing or whatever. And I think we've gotten these points where people just want to, they're just like this or that. and they're not learning about the gray areas where you have to have negotiation and
Right.
diplomacy and actually understanding and empathy. And it seems that is that all hippie stuff, or is that something we should think
No.
about?
No, so this is this right. So what you said is also described in chapter 2. It is a very big part of showing up because life exists largely in the implicit reality. It's in the sense that we have. It's in the intuition. And anytime we have a sense of quote knowingness, it's because that sense of what is right is coming from a deeper place. So it's this area that's neither black nor white, but maybe the mixture of the black and white that lets us recognize this is the right way to relate in the moment, or this is the right way to cast my vote, either with my money or with my ballot or with my behavior, right? I'm going to show up a certain way because of something that's deeper, something that's meaningful within my why, not my what. And by the way, a comment on why. When the why is truly meaningful, it's based in a who. It's in a who. This is for others. This is for this person. This is because I care about my team. This is because I care about how my company shows up on this planet. Right? The real meaning of a why is truly a who.
Who does it serve? Because like
Who
a
does
lot
it
of times, like, what is the point of what you're doing? Like, you ask somebody, like, "Well, no, I want to have $1 million." Like, what are you trying to do with $1 million? Like, is it that you think you're going to have
Mhm.
security, or you think you're going to have independence? Well, you
Right.
could have security and independence, and it doesn't have to be $1 million. So
That's right.
maybe you've got the wrong goal, right? And you're not figuring out, like, who are you, right? And who are you trying to show up for? What are you trying to do something? Are you trying to help your family? Are you trying to help the microcosm or the macrocosm? Do you have something that you
Mhm.
want to share that crosses microcosm and macrocosm? So like, what is it that you're trying to get about? And a lot of times people lose because they just like, well, I want to be on the bandwagon or whatever they think is the popular trend, or they're trying
Uh-huh.
to reinvent what they think activism is. But then they didn't really study activism and understand like what the goal was. Was like maybe the goal was peace? Well, you get peace through war, or do you get the peace through negotiation? So you have to. It's like, what are you trying to do?
Right. So the macrocosm that you're talking about, this is the societal role, right? We show up as an individualized self, a member of a moment, which is this reverberative jamming dance of improvisational life, right? And we're a member of society, self-situation society, right? And I believe is that what you're getting at with the word
Yeah, well, I
with
studied like, yeah,
macrocosm?
like the microcosm is more the individual, like in your
Mhm.
individual world, and then the macrocosm is like your societal impact. Is like we studied like in sociology, riots, right? So like somebody throws a
Mhm.
rock, and there's a bunch of people around them. They had no intention of throwing that rock, but they get a permission structure because just one person did it, and then they all do it, right?
Yeah.
And so then it's like that person, you could ask them later, is like, did you really intend to do that? No, they got caught up in the moment. So humans can get caught up in these macrocosm moments,
Yeah.
and they follow the crowd. And that crowd can go into like disastrous behavior. And we studied that a lot about how you can
Mhm.
trample people, you kill people. Like that was not your intention, but you ended up going that way.
Right. Cultural conditioning. So cultural conditioning right now is at a dangerous precipice. It's at, I think, a crisis point of um, accepting extreme behavior. And the extreme behavior that we should be accepting is compassion and kindness and being in service of the greater good, because the greater good serves us as well.
Every-
So, if it's okay with you, I'd like to get into what the self is from a show up perspective.
Mhm.
Because it turns out the crucible of almost every religion on the planet, and that of Buddhism, which you mentioned, and that of any kind of Eastern contemplative religion or pursuit, if you want to call it that, is not individualized self. It is not the ego self. It is far more the collective self. It's the self as part of something larger. And that is where our self role and our societal role almost start to merge. And when you think about the individualized self, think about the I, me, mine. This is the monkey mind that everyone's meditating and trying to be mindful to rid ourselves of. It's the mind that's going blah, 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 that fills us with fear that we are insufficient, that we're filled with shame, that everyone in the room is smarter than us and deserves to be here and we don't. That is the small, I mean, like individualized self. But the self that truly shows up is far more of this societally defined self that recognizes we are interconnected, far more like leaves on a tree than as a remote pebble that nothing touches, or as the island in the ocean. The reality is you drain the water and there's no island. It's all connected. It might just be like poking out. Okay, we are drops of water in an ocean. So we are each a full and complete instance of the whole, while also being identifiable as separate from, but separate from or distinct from does not mean separate from, right? You might feel like we are not connected with others. We might feel that way because our language teaches us so. The word intelligence teaches us so, but really we are all individuals more than individuals. And we are all intelligent more than intelligent. And the more of us who start to think this way, the more will show up as a MWE, MWE, merged, MWE. This is actually the word of psychiatrist Dan Siegel, who is a very, very renowned speaker on this. We are very much MWE more than me and you.
Yeah, I think a lot of times today, I remember one of the terms in sociology that we were really keying on was like anomy, which is like the lack of social norms, your lack of like social ethical standards. And we would say they were suffering from a macrocosm level anomy with like a lot of the society today. And Western society compared to like Eastern society, I lived in Japan for like 2 years. What I noticed is like, it was interesting kind of behaviors. Like in Japan, they like a lot of the people on the sidewalk, I would walk through Shibuya and they're all walking the same direction. But all the foreigners, right? They were walking whatever way they want to, but within Japan, there was like this collective kind of decision. Like this is on this side of the sidewalk, you walk this way. And Americans, because of their individualism, they would go the wrong way on that sidewalk. They go like the opposite. Like any Westerner would be going the opposite. And I lived there for 2 years, so I started to learn like maybe I should go with the flow because I'm there and I'm living there. But if I was just a tourist, maybe I wouldn't think about it. But it's like that's just a symbol of at a high level of the kind of things that can happen. Because like if you have a society that has more of a collective understanding, like that the whole society
exactly
have respect for. Because I went to Japan and like if you had the flu, you wore a mask. Just not because like somebody told you to, because you were considerate of not giving the flu to somebody else.
Right.
And that was just the standard behavior like in Asia. Because like, it's very packed and you could spread the disease really bad. So they would do that. And it wasn't just about, oh, me, I don't like it. Well, I gotta understand you don't like it, but this is like this idea that maybe you should help somebody else. And not that I want to get to the mass debate, but it's a point of view. Like when you have that thing where you get too much about the individual, you lose that societal connection.
That's exactly right. And actually studies show that. There is a famous study where there was an underwater scene shown to people of different cultures. And the American kid said, well, there's a rock and there's a plant and there's a fish over there. And what I believe it was 112 students from Japan said, they said, there is a family of fish. There is a community under the water. They saw something completely different because relate the way, right, the way different cultures
Look at the world.
relate can either
Yeah.
bring you together or make you feel like a completely individualistic solo person who needs to compete with others and feels a sense of scarcity about, I need to achieve this, right? And that is what I believe is making a lot of us kind of mentally ill and sick and suicidal, and just creating more competition than collaboration in this world. And maybe that's actually why it's still, I'll put, oh, I don't know if you can see this. I'll put this up there.
Yeah, your
Number
book.
one, the book is still number one on Amazon. That's the ebook there. But I mean, you know, there's a thirst for people to learn how to truly show up in society when, you know, we all want to feel like we connect with each other more. We all want to feel a sense of being with and for and you know, serving each other, as opposed to just kind of being alongside but separate from, or maybe against each other.
Yeah. The individualism, you know, the capitalist mindset a lot of times has this individual nature where you kind of reject that. You go, oh, I'm going to be the Horatio Alger myth. I'm just going to do it all myself. I'm going to become the big Citizen Kane character. I'm going to be that, you know, get to be there. But what happens? Like if you isolate yourself, like you become so exceptional that you have no connections. Like you get to this point where you're like so isolated, you're totally in the thralls of enemy and you're not connected at all. And like, so the idea is like, maybe you shouldn't go so extreme, but you know, materialism and capitalism sometimes can go too extreme. Any form, socialism all the forms can go
Yes.
too extreme. A lot of it, you know, from a Buddhist perspective, is about balance and like
Yes.
harmony. Like
Yes,
as a musician,
sure.
like I strive, you know, in a song, I can have a section of the song that has harmony. I can have a section that has noise. I can have a section that has dissonance or distortion, but they're all part of the whole. And at
Yeah.
some point, you try to get to that harmony, but you're going to have those other forms, right? And the idea is like, how can you balance life? It's going to have some distortion. It's going to have some disconnected. It's going to be, you know, noise. How do you get to the clarity and the harmony, knowing that those other things exist, and how do you manage it?
The wisdom that you have shared in this discussion so far, Phantom, is, I just want to give you such a massive hug. So the distortion and the harmony they define each other, and this is a big part of showing up, right? So music shows up a certain way. You can't have the one without the other. These are not opposites. You can't have up without down. You can't have east without west. You can't have hard without soft, right? And it turns out, if you keep going north as far as you can, guess what? You come back around from the south.
Yep.
They actually co-create each other. And the further, the more vehemently we resist something that we fear, the more we bring it toward us, because that's the energy. We're coming back to the energy that you mentioned. You have such wisdom, your time in Japan and your music and your studying of protests and things at Bowdoin. I mean, like, what a privilege it is to share this space with you.
Well, I just try to put it together because holistic, you know, you talk about people who are holistic practitioners, and I see a lot of people get so narrow today. And I've been a person, I like to be cross genre. Like my music is cross genre. I call it expansive. People want to pin me down. So what's it mean? It means like I can have, some of it is jazz, some of it's rock, some of it's punk, some of it's African, some of it's whatever I feel at the moment. So I don't want to get defined. And they said, well, you have to be defined. It's like, well, the way I do it is kind of hard to define it other than say it's expansive. So,
Right.
and so people always want to put you into a lane.
Yes.
That's easy for them to understand. But sometimes things, you know, people will shift over their careers into different points. They evolve. And so, like, yeah, you could have been at this point 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but this is where you are now. Right. So why can't you be allowed to have that? And maybe even in one moment you have different capabilities, and you could be an artist, you could be a mathematician, you could be a philosopher, You could be somebody that's practicing, different types of religious spirituality. It's like, but you could have all those things in one person. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you're just an Einstein. That's it. Like, no,
Yeah.
you're multifaceted, and that kind of gets to the idea of this 3D nature of how humans are modeled. And so I think we've been talking about it, but maybe you can be more explicit about what that means for you.
Yes, yes. My publisher, described, she said, Marcy, the model of showing up that you've built, right? Which, by the way, is based in evolutionary biology. Like, this is how nature designed humans to show up. The publisher said, your model paints the picture in 3D of how humans are designed to show up by nature. So what she's talking about, the model has 3 roles, but there's actually a skill for each role. So let me add that. So our 3 roles: individualized self, situational member, societal member. There's a skill for each. Grounding in ourselves, so knowing who we are and why. Ready for our situations. That means knowing that a situation is this improvisational dance where we're co-creating each other, right? And then our societal role, we want to be connected with others. And there's a word that I trademarked, actually, that I created because one didn't exist, which is all-telligent. What that means is to be connected within the collective, within the group of people or the team or the firm or the educational system or the company or the band, right? To be connected within a broader group in a way where you all want to serve, you all want to help each other. So instead of being intelligent, we are all intelligent. Now there's a third axis in the model. It's 3D. It's not just X and Y. So there are roles, there are skills. But in addition to that, there's actually levels, right? Everything has some version of low, medium, high, right?
Yeah.
So there's the low, like you're barely there. That's the lowest level of showing up. Call it level 1. It's red in the model. It's red. And then we get toward green, which is level 3, truly showing up, which is really living grounded, ready, and intelligent in our 3 roles. And then there's this middle zone. And the middle zone is, you can, assume it's orange, right? Because we're going from red through green. In the orange, like 80% of us, we're just showing up. And that is what my 20 years of research shows, is that 80% of us just show up 80% of the time. And what does that mean? It means we're kind of like we are most of the time, right? We're a little underslept. We're kind of maybe irritable. We're a little stressed. So we kind of just walk in and we kind of bring with us like whatever we got. And we bring that to most of the moments in our lives. And we bring it to our parenting and to our work and to our friends and to our legacy. So ultimately what you want to do is you want to pause, right? You want to pause and you want to think about, what are really the most important moments of my day? And for most of us, it's a lot of the same thing. It's like, well, when I greet my kids or my spouse or my best friend, like who are the people? When do I see them for the first time and last time each day? And kind of at work, what are the 1 or 2 most important things that I'm going to do? Is it actually getting certain stuff done by myself? Is it my contribution within a meeting? What is it? So choose those things and pause before you do them and think, how am I choosing to show up to this moment? And once you think about it in advance, you're far more likely to show up as you choose than to just.
Rather than just phoning it in, you have to be intentional. It's like a lot of times if you're in like a session with a musician, right, and somebody comes and they're not fully prepared, you're like, well, you're phoning it in, because we're expecting people to be bringing like their A game or
Right.
even A plus game. And if like somebody shows up and they're not really, well, that's not really hitting it, right? We're expecting you to show us something like amazing. And if you come in and you're like, that's not really amazing. So it's like not every time you can do that, but like if you're purposely in a creative session, you don't want to really be phoning it in. So it's like, so we have a certain thing that this is supposed to be the time where we're making this new thing.
Right.
You want to probably try to psych yourself into it, or maybe say, well, if you're not really there, should you really do it? Like, because if you
Mhm.
can't
Right.
summon the energy, then you're not really doing anybody a favor, because you're not really doing the thing that's magical. Because a lot of times you'll have a situation and you didn't even know that it was going to be magical, but everybody was sharing, like you said, this all intelligence type of model,
Right.
where it's not, you don't even have to say anything. Like, you come in and the singer just automatically comes up with amazing lyric. Somebody comes up with a great bass line. It just all kind of gels, and he's like, and he had maybe a little bit of a plan, but it's really that moment of present moment kind of
Right.
jam session. And that happens in life. Like, when, like, I work with systems, and we have these web meetings with our developers and our UI people, and we're talking to different people in different countries all at the same time, and we're trying to build something.
Mhm.
And sometimes the happy accident happens, and that's better
Right.
than anything we planned. Like, the happy accident actually solved the problem. And we're like, wow, that's even better than what we were trying to plan. But we had to embrace it and not be scared of it. The fact that
Yes.
the manager didn't plan it, or the other person didn't plan it, but it actually is good. So
Yes.
just because it wasn't on the schedule doesn't mean we shouldn't do it.
Right. Right, the Bob Ross happy accident. Loving that, loving that. Right, so this is your situational role coming alive and being the primary thing for you in those jam sessions, which are actually a bunch of software engineers talking about like how to automate part of the system, right? Or build a new part of the system, which you wouldn't think is a creative process, but actually how you pay attention within the moment is a very creative process. It is a creative act to choose how we attend. And when you make that choice of how to attend, you are using the creative hemisphere of your brain, that right hemisphere, which is the only one that can truly sense what does the person mean by what they're saying? Right? Do I want to show care? Do I want to say, tell me more? What do you mean by that? When you don't attend that way, what happens? You jump to conclusions, you talk at each other, you don't really build upon and move forward, right?
There's no listening. Like, the big thing is like listening skills, and then not being scared to ask what is perceived to be an ignorant question. But a lot of times, like, we have people who come from different cultures. I'm working with people from India. I'm working with people from Russia. Not now, but we used to. But like EU or Pacific, and so they have different points of view. So how
Right,
I see something as a Westerner, and how somebody
right,
in Japan or Korea sees it, if they have the freedom to actually express it, I don't really see it that way, and they give me that cultural perspective. It's like, wow, we were coming from this very narrow vision, thinking because I'm from the USA and that's the way I see it. But if I actually make
uh-huh,
an environment where I'm not going to be so top down, that I'm going to allow people to actually express and say, hey, there's no bad note, there's no bad question. So point it out. If you allow that to happen, then you'll get good good collaboration. But if you kind of come in and say, well, we're not going to allow anybody to talk, and we're just going to top down it, well, what are you going to get? You're going to get what the manager thinks it should be, and that's probably not what it should be.
Uh, what you said is so important just now. That is so important. We all need to elevate the voices and hearts and minds of others. It is the only way that we are going to figure out how to be healthier, how to be happier, how to create a sustainable planet. Because if we top down it, like we're going to keep doing what we've been doing, which is not putting us on such a great track. It would be an honor to be on your team. Okay. And if you're leading that team, those people are incredibly lucky, Phantom, because you truly understand that, we don't hear what each other means. There is a statistic out of the University of Texas, and it turns out David Brooks references this in his speeches and book. And I really hope that researcher and professor would come and tell me who exactly is this person. But what the findings are, which will blow your mind, are that when we say something, if it's a stranger who we're speaking with, over 75% of the time, the stranger interprets something different than we intended.
Mhm.
Well, that's if it's a stranger. What do you think the statistic is if it's someone who actually knows us, maybe someone who lives in our household or someone who speaks with us every day? How often do they interpret what we truly meant? What's your
I
guess?
think it's probably like there's a disconnect. I think in society, what we've seen, I think from my sociological studies, is like people don't really hear what you're saying. Even people that know you, you could talk to your wife, and husbands and wives, they do this all the time. That's why there's like high divorce, because like it's like did he really what Pop said to Mom didn't get what Pop said because I talked to Pop and he thought it meant this. I talked to Mom and she says it says that. Well, they've known each other for 40 years.
That's,
So it's obvious that they know each other, but they're going like this. They're going like, what's that? Because they're
Mhm.
not really listening, or they don't understand what they're saying.
Right, or someone simply hasn't asked, when you say this, what exactly are you saying? So it turns out the statistic from the research is actually 45% of the time, the listener interpreted effectively what the speaker said, which means that 55% of the time, the
Yeah.
listener understood what they thought it meant, but it turns out it's substantively different than what the person meant. And the words can be as simple as I love you. I love you might mean, you know, I, it feeds me to care for you. And I am dedicated to an extent that I would really put anything aside to help you, to serve you. To someone else, I love you might mean, the person really likes me and wants to spend time with me now, but when the next best thing comes, they're gone.
Oh
Right?
yeah. Yeah.
Right?
It's
Okay. Am
situational
I
for them. It's
speaking?
like it's a different point. Yeah, different points of viewing it. Different because it's their experience of love. So if the way they experience love is that when they hear it, they kind of picture in the frame.
Right.
That's how they see it. But if you never talk to them deeply, say, what's your vision of love? Like, what does it mean to you? Did you
Right.
ever really ask somebody that? Did do you ask them like, what is it that makes you happy? They may assume that something makes you happy because they kind of lied and say, yeah, that makes me happy. And then you never even knew there's like, well, they don't even like what you're doing, but you think they like it because they don't
Right.
tell you the truth. It's like, yeah, I love it. It's like, well, you don't.
Yes. And it can be as something simple as burr, I'm cold. Burr, I'm cold might mean for you, okay, Marcy's cold. Burr, I'm cold might mean for someone else, she really wants my jacket, but she's not asking me for it. Maybe I should offer it. Or like, wow, how passive aggressive. She's saying, burr, I'm cold. Instead of saying fandom, like it would, if you're not, needing it, it would be really wonderful if I could wear your jacket for the last 10 minutes of this podcast, right? It
Yeah,
means
yeah,
something totally different. And the thing is, no one is intending to walk away not fully being with the other. They might be listening really, really well. It's simply that the same exact words mean something within the context in which someone else grew up. And
hmm
even my sister and I, it's like we grew up in different households and we're 14 months apart and we just look at each other like, what? That experience when we were 10 meant this to you. It meant that to me. We never figured this
yeah,
out until now. Anyway, the point is showing up. Showing up is an art. Showing up is an
hmm
art. And the more we understand about the definition of how nature designed us to show up so that we thrive, the happier and healthier we're all going to be. And the more likely we are to create the world that we want. So I really, really, really want to thank you for creating the space for me to share with people that there truly is a model and that, it's just simple, right? We aren't just an individualized self. There's a situation right now and you're in it. All of you look around. right? There's something going on that you're responding to, just as you said, Phantom, right? We are culturally conditioned by what's going on around us. And what we do matters to all of society. So let's interact in a way that serves everybody, and then we'll feel good about ourselves.
And definitely, I totally am vibing with this approach, because the law of attraction is like big in my head. A lot of what we do is like, if you move toward the positive, then you attract the positive. If you have a positive mind frame, then things will happen. If you kind of down in the dumps, well, it's gonna melancholy is gonna like just be all around you. If you try to radiate more self confidence and more, less limitation, then the opportunities suddenly start showing up. It's like, why does that show up? Because you believe it. So if you choose to show up believing and not being so negative, then you can have a positive effect on the macrocosm and the microcosm. It's both ways.
Because showing up is in all three roles, the macro and the micro, and in between. So showing up puts the law of attraction on speed. Like showing up is the exponential version of the law of attraction. Why? Because everything shows up. So what it does with the law of attraction is it puts you all on the same page. It turns your self-focused mirror outward, so that the world can reverberate with you. Why? Because it exists within the situational role that we're all in. That is how we bring the law of attraction to life. It's in the moments of our life. And it shows you how to merge the I and the collective into the situation, so that now there's this we that's going on. So you actually receive what it is that you're envisioning and what you want and what you put on your vision board and what you write about and talk about and have gratitude for and all of that.
Well, it's very vital, the discussion we have. And I want to let people also know that they can click on choosetoshowup.com. I'm assuming they can get all the information about you in your book there. And that's fully clickable everywhere that we're published. It's not clickable now, but you will be able to click through. And I do appreciate you being on the Family Electric Coach podcast. As I said, we were live on Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. We'll be on all the podcast platforms that you can listen to or watch a podcast by tomorrow. And I wanted to thank you again for being on the show.
Phantom, thank you. This has truly contributed to me in such a big way. I'm taking you with me. So thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Have a great night. Bye, everyone.